This is the Legacy Radio Network. I'm your host, Dennis Tubbergen. You're listening to the Everything Financial Radio Show. And just absolutely delighted to have back with me today on the show Leslie Paige, spokesperson for Citizens Against Government Waste. And Leslie, before we jump in and start talking about the fiscal condition of the country and Obamacare and the upcoming election, tell our listeners where they can get more information about your organization and learn more about your work.
Sure. Thank you for that. And it is, well, first let me start by saying that our website is a great resource for anyone who wants to know about government waste, fraud, mismanagement. We have a lot of good links on it, and so, you can start there, and it'll give you a starter kit, if you will, on how taxpayer money is being misspent in Washington. And the website is www.cagw.org. cagw.org. Or, of course, it'll come up if you put our full name in Citizens Against Government Waste. And on there, we kind of have a few kind of stalwart publications and things that we do every year to kind of guide taxpayers and how their money is spent. One of the main things we do is we have a Porker of the Month, which is we like to choose a sort of dubious achievement award, if you will, which we give to a member of Congress, a governor. We gave our first Porker of the Month to a governor last month it was Mayor Bloomberg, actually, for his soda ban, silly soda ban, 16-ounce soda ban announcement. But we also, mostly we do members of Congress, executive branch people. We kind of try and pick somebody who has sort of exemplified the wasteful mentality of Washington, D.C. and in general around the country. And that goes out monthly. We also do ratings, which I think most people would find very, very useful in the upcoming election. And we have done ratings for over 15 years now, maybe longer. And you can go check your member of Congress, your senator, and see where they stand on wasteful issues. And we pick quite a few votes to look at every year that are related to waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and all kinds of good, fiscal issues that we pick. So those are the two kinds of options. We also, we have a Twitter account. GovWaste is our Twitter account, and you can go on and check on that one, and that'll give you kind of little updates. So we link to a lot of great groups on there and other resources as well. So those are the kinds of things on our website that you could find that will kind of guide or at least start the education process if you can stand it. I mean, the truth is it's not for the faint of heart. I would recommend if you've got don't have a strong constitution, a strong stomach, don't go to the website because you won't be able to tolerate.
That's exactly right. Leslie, speaking of strong constitution, I want to shift gears here a minute because recently Chief Justice John Roberts surprised everyone in upholding the individual mandate that is the chassis of Obamacare. In your view, in your organization's view, what effect will Obamacare have on the deteriorating financial condition of the United States?
Well, I think everyone is quite aware of it, and I think most people have now started to get to know the law a little bit better, and what they're seeing is not very reassuring. In fact, the more you get to know it, the less reassuring it is. It is a huge, huge onerous impact on all Americans, particularly small businesses, and all businesses. And it's going to be a massive tax burden, but it's also, now that we know that it's a tax, thank you to Chief Justice Roberts, that was a very unfortunate decision, and everybody, from our perspective, and we it's no point really in trying to determine what his thinking was on this. We just have to sort of move forward under this current new regime, whatever the decision was. But I will say now that it's been deemed a tax, there's a couple questions that will crop up that I think need to be addressed, and of course, one of them is if it's a tax, how is it that the Department of Health and Human Services has been able to issue about 1,200 to 1,400 waivers? I don't know if they've been keeping track, but the HHS has been handing out waivers saying you will not have to impose this on your employees to maybe over 1,000 entities, companies, unions, large entities have been given waivers. The process for giving the waivers has been very inscrutable anyway. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion as how are these decisions being made, and it isn't clear, why some company gets a waiver and someone else does not. But the bottom line is if it is in fact a tax, it is unclear to us whether or not they can just sort of summarily hand out waivers without congressional approval. If that could be possible, if the executive branch can just basically wave its magic wand and say you are not required to pay this tax, you can imagine what kind of a horrible mess that would be. So we think that there's going to be some questions about these waivers. And I also think that as a taxpayer watchdog group and a government waste group, we're very concerned about the bureaucracy that's going to grow up around Obamacare and the cost of that bureaucracy. I mean, there are just hundreds of new task forces, commissions, and various advisory boards that are going to be created by this law, all of which will have to be paid for with taxpayer revenues, and they will grow. It is just, it is historically inevitable that no matter what, if you create a new agency, you create a new advisory board, they never get smaller. They only get larger and more expensive and and they need to find something to do, so they regulate a lot. They regulate a lot more. So I think we're looking at just an enormous burgeoning of not just HHS but the IRS, because as we know, they're going to be hiring hundreds, if not thousands, of new employees to help administer this new quote-unquote tax.
Leslie, I want to shift gears here a minute, if I could, the time we have left. There is obviously a lot of discussion going on now, this being an election year, with the so-called Bush tax cuts expiring at the end of this year. The president has come out and said that he wants to keep the cuts in place for people earning less than $250,000 a year. But in my view, it's unlikely any of this gets addressed before the election, and then potentially we have a lame duck session of Congress, depending on the outcome of the election, that might have to deal with this stuff. So this seems to be setting our country up for what could be something that's maybe pretty embarrassing worldwide, not to mention pretty devastating. What's your take in the 4 minutes or so we have left?
Well, we are, I think we have probably never seen quite as much dysfunction as, at least in my lifetime, I have never seen quite as much dysfunction in our institution of Congress as we have right now. Basically, a lame duck session would be 20 days. All right, that's all we have in November past the election, and between the time that, the election is January 1. And in that time period, we have potentially a debt ceiling vote. We have to decide on $1.2 trillion of sequestration, which, it has to be divvied up between defense and non-defense spending, which is basically
explain that, will you please, to our listeners who don't know what that term sequestration means?
If your listeners will remember back when the fiscal super committee did its job or didn't, it came up with a plan to cut certain amounts to grapple with our fiscal condition and to bring down some deficits, to get some deficit reduction, and to put the country on a path to some sort of reasonable balancing of the budget. It failed to achieve any kind of actionable list of cuts and revenue enhancements or whatever that they were charged to find. They were unable to do that. And so they were basically, sequester was the alternative. It was the stick, if you will, that was put into the law that said, you have to come up with this. If you don't come up with this and enact this by a certain date, you will now be forced into sequestration, which is that's automatic cuts of $1.2 trillion over 10 years, and it will have to be divvied up between non-defense and defense. And then everyone will have to scramble to find those cuts. It's not a good way to do business. Let's just put it that way. It's a terrible, terrible way to do business. So we have sequestration coming up. That has to happen by January 1. And then we got the Medicare doc fix, and the tax cuts are set to expire. And did I mention a debt ceiling vote? As we know, that's always just an absolute, terrible, fight in Congress every time about a debt ceiling vote. We're now required. We have a debt ceiling vote of 16.4 trillion, I believe, and we're rapidly approaching it by that. We will be hitting it sometime early next year. And we're going to need to either increase our borrowing ability so that we can pay for that. It's all bad. Let's just put it that way. And what we have now is a Congress that, if they don't act before the election, is going to have 20 days to deal with this. Now, they will have an opportunity to change the sequestration vote. They can kick it off to next year. They can do anything they want. But I think it's sort of emblematic that we are faced with this kind of perfect storm of kind of bad news that has been festering for a long time and has not been addressed. And that gives you some idea of what kind of Congress we're dealing with.
Leslie, I know your organization is nonpartisan, but give me some idea as to how you think that this may play out. Do the tax cuts get extended? Do we see a big turnover of Congress? How does all this play out in your view?
Listen, I don't have tea leaves. I'm not even gonna. I don't know how it's going to play out. I can tell you one thing. Let me say this about the sequestration. One of the first things that I think you're going to see is it's already happening. You may be hearing about it in the news. Is that a lot of members of Congress, including Democrats and Republicans, it's a bipartisan effort, are very, very concerned about the cuts to the Defense Department, and they are going to do everything they can to minimize them. I mean, it is virtually impossible in this day and age. I mean, first of all, the Defense Department, to everyone's knowledge, is the only agency in the federal government that has taken real cuts to its bottom line. Unlike all other agencies, Defense has really taken its hits over the years, and they have, we're basically, according to even President Obama's Defense Secretary, Leon Panetta, has said this is devastating. This is cutting into bone and muscle, not fat. Now, having said that, there are ways that you could cut the defense budget. There's ways of changing the procurement laws and doing some other things that would help that could get those cuts, but not all of them. And I think there's a lot of members of Congress that are very concerned in a time of escalating global military crises. Look at Syria. Hello, that was this morning. And that is going to be ongoing for many, many weeks and months to come. We are seeing an unraveling there. It is not a good idea to basically gut your Defense Department at a time like this. Not to mention the fact that, you're talking about enormous amounts of high-skilled jobs that would be lost. So there's going to be some movement on the Defense Department to protect it or to, I wouldn't say hold it harmless. I think they're going to try and mitigate the devastation of those cuts. That's going to be the first thing that people are going to start to see in the next couple of weeks. And the reason for that is because the Defense Department is bound by law to send out notices in plenty of time to let contractors know they're going to no longer be paid. And we are rapidly approaching that moment when they have to send those notices out.
Leslie, I sure appreciate it. We're going to have to leave it right there. I appreciate you being with us. The website, again, is cagw.org. And this is Everything Financial Radio on the Legacy Radio Network. We will return after these words. Stay with us.